I read that letter. My heart was pounding, and sure enough, it was just as sad and fearful about loss pending as anything else I'd read in the last year or so. It's happened. I thought, oh my God, it's happening here too, even in Southeast. And I saw in an instant very clearly what was going to happen if nobody did anything. If we didn't fight back, it would certainly all be gone, all be logged, all be destroyed within the next few years. And so I decided at that moment, well, this is it. This is the time has come to fight and go to battle in Southeast, and I'm there. I'll do all I can.
The Tongass National Forest. It's the largest remaining temperate rainforest on the planet, spanning nearly 500 miles along Alaska's southeastern panhandle. It's a vast expanse of forested islands carved by thousands of years of glacial activity and sustained by an almost constant supply of fresh water. Over 100 inches of rain per year combined with ice melt to create thousands of streams that sustain the ancient hemlocks and Sitka spruce, which lie at the heart of southeast Alaska. These giants tower hundreds of feet into the air and commonly live over 400 years. Their structure and shade make up the habitat for some of North America's most iconic wildlife, including the grizzly and coastal brown bear, one of the most robust wild salmon populations left on Earth, and the world's largest concentration of bald eagles. Though the pristine beauty of the forest captured many of Alaska's early settlers, the prospect of economic growth became too great to be ignored. And soon this bastion of wilderness would fall into the hands of industry.
I could not believe this was happening, that these trees, like these trees here, were being cut down. Not just the trees, but the whole forest across from my cabin in Teneke was cut down. And this clear cut appeared, and that clear cut, and then that clear cut. And I thought, this is absolutely unconscionable.
Nearly all of southeastern Alaska, except for the small areas of its few cities, is rated within has seen its trees as a resource to be cut down and exploited. "98% of the merchantable timber is scheduled to be cut. The result of clear-cut logging has been demonstrated on nearby Baranof and Admiralty Islands, where the effect on aesthetics is obvious. The traveler who comes to get a glimpse of the natural Alaska that was will not come to see the stumps. So far, not 1 square foot of national forest in Alaska has been set aside as wilderness, protected from roads, from motor-driven vehicles, from logging.
In the small coastal town of Sitka, logging quickly became the center of economic activity. Pulp mill worker Chuck Johnstone was 36 when the cutting began, and like many others, he joined the mill for a year-round job. Though he worked for the mill, Chuck still had a strong connection to the neighboring forest. And while many were praising this new industrial era, Chuck began to fear the loss of his wilderness identity.
Southeast Alaska, at least, was losing its identity. With the pulp mill here, the one in Ketchikan, and one proposed for Juneau. We could see the handwriting on the wall, and the butchery of the forest. It was really kind of scary.
While attending a parents' night at Sitka High, Chuck shared his concerns with a group of teachers. Although the majority of the community was hesitant to openly oppose the mill, a few were not afraid to admit that witnessing the clearing of Stargavin Valley at the edge of town was evidence enough that Tongass was not an endless resource and that action must be taken. The group became officially known as the Sitka Conservation Society. Although all of the members were passionate about saving the wildlands of the Tongass, few knew where or how to begin. Local printer and former Stanford University professor Jack Calvin soon took on the responsibilities of leading the group. But without assistance and outnumbered by supporters of the mill, victory seemed impossible.
At this time, it is not easy to be a conservationist. in a small town in southeastern Alaska. Conservation was simply not regarded at all as any kind of mainstream idea. And it was seen as something more subversive and something that worked against community interest in this part of the world. This was a completely different environment from the one that we know today, in which these people were operating.
The members of the group paid a high price, ostracized both in the community and the workplace. Furthermore, there was only one way to protect public lands from logging, and it was a long shot at best.
Well, some of the teachers in this group knew about the Wilderness Act. This was a recent thing. It had just been passed a few years earlier in 1964. Areas that are formally designated as wilderness get the strongest protection that's available for any public land. In many ways, it's as strong, if not stronger, than national park status. And it's not easy to get wilderness designation. This has to come by an act of Congress.
The Wilderness Act took 8 years to pass. It was first introduced in 1956, and it came about because of the vision of a few people who roamed the West and saw that the pace of logging and road building and mining and other development was eventually going to be so great that there wouldn't be hardly anything left at all. And these were a special part of our history and a special part of our memories. So that's why it was done. Well, Alaska, being Alaska, was really the last frontier. It was about the last place that development was coming to compared to the lower 48 states, but it was coming there too.
As the group sat discussing what to save, hearts began to sink. It was clear that only a small section could be preserved, a hollow reflection of the once pristine Tongass. The decision for the group was surreal and was only further hardened by the constant threats they received from the community. However, in the midst of this looming shadow, Jack Calvin rose and spoke about the western coast of Chichagof-Yakobi Island. He described its scenery, wildlife, and natural history. But at the end of the day, it was his love for the place that resonated most with the group. The other members agreed on the area, and setting the bar as high as possible, they ventured onward with the hope of obtaining a formal wilderness designation for West Chichagof and Yakobi Island.
Gail Corbin and Jack Calvin were great networkers. They knew a lot of people in the conservation community, not just in Alaska, but in many other places as well. And one of them, a key person, a man named Brock Evans. He was the Northwest representative for the Sierra Club. And when they talked with Brock Evans, he was immediately enthusiastic and said, "Yep, I want to help you people." I think that Brock Evans could see the passion and he could feel the commitment in this small group of people from this remote Alaskan town. And I think he had a clear sense for what was at stake here on the Alaska coast. He gave them 3 pieces of key advice. 1, ally yourselves with as many other organizations as possible. Make yourself larger. 2nd, always fight for more than you think it's possible to achieve. And 3rd, Brock Evans said, endless pressure, endlessly applied.
With a defined goal and the support of the Sierra Club, the group began the first conservation campaign in the history of Southeast Alaska. Within a few months, the first Alaskan Wilderness Area proposal was drafted and submitted for approval. Although shot down immediately, the group pushed forward with resilience. Although consumed with the battle for designation, Jack Calvin realized there was an inherent need to let others experience the wild of West Chichagof firsthand.
There's no substitute for getting people you want to support you to see the place, or even people who are neutral to see the place. These are love battles. These are emotions, and no apologies for being emotions. People get emotional about a place, but that's part of being human, is being emotional. And when you see a place like West Chichagof and go up and say, oh, Goulding Harbor, and you see the footprint of the big bear right there and see the water coming into it and look around and whatever these things are, that's a powerful impact that you never forget.
I just think that people are generally just starving for wilderness. They're just, there's not much left. And we've got it here, and it's incredible. You know, I'd lay down my life for it. I just think this public land is such a special thing. You know, it's wild.
It was a simple idea that would become an essential part of the group's strategy. And for nearly 13 years, Jack and Chuck led groups from all over the United States on wilderness trips into the Tongass. For those visitors, the Alaskan experience resonated louder than words and made advocates of hundreds.
We went through Salisbury Sound and came upon there was the wild coast of the Cass Peninsula, and I remember some of the place names like that. And we went up the west side for a while and in and out of, I remember Goulding Harbor especially, and some other places. And my God, all my years of wandering through Olympic National Park and the North Cascades, which are magnificent to me, and Glacier Park, there was nothing like this. All this rainforest at tidewater, and the glaciers coming down and the sharp peaks going up, was unbelievably beautiful to me and very special. And the wildlife that was there, and the ancient rhythm of the sea washing against the rocks and the rivers floating down. And if there ever was a natural Eden, this was it to me.
If folks that have not had that experience can listen to that music, that's one step away from the music and the humdrum of the urban life. I know that they're going to be spiritually richer, that their life's experience and their ability to understand how the land and people are interconnected and rely on each other is just self-evident. But you've got to get out and see that connection. Otherwise, it's difficult to understand that that connection is there.
I think it's good for people, not just kids, to come out to a place like this. And it takes a day or two, but you do end up in the natural rhythm of the place. You realize that what's really important is maybe just shelter and food and good companionship. I also think it's just important for people that may never even go here to know that this place exists. There's a place where the bears are roaming freely, where you can go and the deer are still wandering around this headland here, where there's pretty much everything that was here 500 years ago is still here. I think it's just important to know it exists.
With every trip, more people were turning their eyes to the issues of the Tongass, and the Sitka Conservation Society's hard work was finally paying off. After nearly 10 years of working and waiting, national support was building to preserve lands throughout the state of Alaska.
There was a proposal before Congress called the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act, the acronym ANILCA. You hear it all the time in Alaska still today. This is a massive piece, the most momentous piece of environmental legislation in the history of the United States, to establish national parks, national wildlife refuges, all kinds of protected wildlands throughout the state of Alaska. There were hearings in communities all over Alaska on this legislation proposal, ANILCA, and that included Sitka.
One of the largest and most heated community events ever to occur in the small town. The congressional hearing stood at the apex of conflict, as both sides took turns lobbying their proposals before the nation's leaders. It was a golden opportunity, and the group was prepared to share their love of the forest and the need to save a vanishing wilderness identity.
The conservationists came and they expressed their love for the land. They spoke about the value of wildness. They spoke about the uniqueness of this place in which they live. They spoke about the importance of these wild places for all the people of America. These were local people from these small communities. They were the voice of the forest.
For nearly 15 years, the Sitka Conservation Society fought and spoke on behalf of the silent wilderness. Although only a whisper at first, their story and love for the place spread, and the echoes of the Tongass were heard throughout the nation. On December 2, 1980, President Carter signed the final version of ANILCA. setting aside over 100 million acres of protected land and preserving for all time the West Chichagof-Yakobi wilderness.
There's nothing like the joy of working so long and struggling so hard to achieve a goal like that and to know you've achieved it. Just an utter, deep, deep joy, and it's there and it's forever. And it must be like winning a war or something like that, because that's exactly what it feels like when you're in it.
And for those people who had worked for so many years in so many ways to try to protect this critical piece of their home territory, it was an incredible moment. And so today we have a place, the West Chichagof-Yakobi Wilderness Area, that will, exactly as those people dared to dream, it's going to stay the same as it was 100 and 1,000 years ago. It's going to be the same for the children and for the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren of future generations. What this story tells me is an affirmation of the power of democracy and of the power of concerted human voices, of people who are willing to stand up for their place and whose energy will not be exhausted in support of the protection of the wildness and the wildlife that is the heritage of all American people. The beauty of the existence today of the West Chichagof-Yakobi Wilderness Area, the beauty of those efforts of all those people over that time, is the demonstration of the fact that this small group of people from a tiny community, a speck on the coast of Alaska, that these people could move something that became a part of the heritage of a nation.